Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Malcolm Renfrew Interdisciplinary Colloquium. It is Tuesday, November 16th, 2021. We are in the last stretch of the fall semester. We have two presentations remaining after the Thanksgiving break. So I'll tell you just a little bit about them before introducing today's speaker. 2 weeks from today, on November 30th, the speaker will be Matthew Fox Amato from the History Department, speaking about Civil War iconoclasm. And during the last week of the regular semester before finals week, our speaker will be Kathy Barnard Lapointe, who is retiring at the end of this semester after 6 years as Director of Alumni Relations, and her topic will be All in the Vandal Family. So we have those two presentations to look forward to after the fall break. We are also in the process of inviting proposals for the spring semester of 2022. This semester has been entirely on Zoom. Next semester, we will be on Zoom only for the first half of the semester up to the week before spring break. And then after spring break, we'll have a mix of field trips to labs and studios and various locales around campus, as well as some in-person seminars. And if you're on the Renfrew email list, you will receive an announcement later this week inviting your nominations for speakers in the spring. Our speaker today, Phil Mead, is in the College of Art and Architecture in the architecture program, and he is a previous presenter, both on his own and as part of a group of other architects at the University of Idaho. He teaches global history of modern architecture, introduction to the built environment, as well as the design studio. He previously taught at the New School of Architecture in San Diego and at Texas Tech University. His current research examines well-being in design, which encompasses a range of disciplines from architectural history and theory to psychology to environmental control systems. Phil has been a member of the University of Idaho faculty since 2002, and we're delighted to have him today to speak about architectural lessons from the world's happiest country.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ken. So in 2020, just before the outbreak, I took a sabbatical and decided to go to both Denmark and Helsinki and Finland during the dead of winter, during the most miserable time of the year. And I wanted to see how these countries that have been so highly ranked in the happiness survey fared during the winter, and how their designs responded to the wintertime. So my research as indicated has been on health and design, and I usually present at health and design conferences. A lot of them were way back in before 2000, about 2000 to 2012, were mostly at hospital conferences, and this was one of them in Boston, where I presented my work, more historical work on Sun Valley. But I've always been interested, since I lived in Southern California, on environmental design and health. Since Southern California was a health destination for those with tuberculosis back in the late 1800s. In fact, its population really exploded from a number of people back east that came to the West to get better, because due to the environment was so much healthier. So I've given a number of presentations. I was also a member of the Society of Light Treatment and Biological Rhythms. I was the only architect within a group of psychiatrists and scientists, mostly scientists, from all over the world. And I just would hang out with them actually. And I presented to them twice. One of the times was in Stockholm, and you can see I'm in a light-filled room there. And it's very high brightness in these rooms in St. Göran's Hospital in Stockholm, where in the dead of the winter, many people with seasonal affective disorder would go and they would get better. But you also know, and some of you may use some of these light boxes, and they're somewhat problematic, but they're very useful in treating seasonal depression. But these are examples of how the environment now can help us in depression and our physical well-being. And so I was very interested for a while in Sun Valley because it was sold in the 30s as an environmental health spa, much as similar to the European ski resorts, which started out as health spas. So Sun Valley was just one more ski resort, the first one in America, actually, as a destination ski resort that was sold as a healthy place to vacation and ski. So there's many things that interest me about that, in addition to the environment as environmental medicine, but also it's a winter design. In fact, it's more geared towards winter and in how to respond to winter, okay? And the challenges that wintertime poses on our mind and body. And I've always thought, because I also teach, architectural history, that there are different, times in history where I look at it as different ways of promoting well-being, and it's sort of like in a progression. Not always. A lot of, especially the more ancient, is more about expressions of power, but even with like Roman bathhouses, etc. That's and Asclepiad hospitals or health spas. That's a environmental medicine. So Sun Valley was very much like that, and so. Yep, I'm not able to turn here. So let me also, during this time, as I was presenting to different conferences, that these various books would come out. There it is, Dan Buettner of the Blue Zones, that had had happiness in the title, and they were about places, either about architecture or cities. And so I read all of them. They're not really written by academics, although the most academic is The Architecture of Happiness by Alain Baton. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with him, but he's more of a popular philosopher. And so his has a lot of insights, and they all say different things about how architecture can make us happy. The least academic of the books is A Place to Be Happy, and it's written by an architect, Chuck First, out of Chicago, self-published book. And he makes reference to positive psychology. And I had known about positive psychology and had been just kind of casually reading about it. But I began to really look at it closely about 5 years ago. And it was started by Dr. Martin Seligman of the University of Pennsylvania. in 1998, when he was the president of the American Psychological Association, he made the creed, okay, we need to stop just looking at disease and getting people from -10 to 0. We need to now look at how we as psychologists and psychiatrists can get people from 0 to 10. And so, since that time, there have been a number of courses in, Ivy League schools and universities, including the University of Idaho, on happiness. In fact, the first ones that came out I was aware of by the Ivy League schools had happiness in the title. But now the more academic term seems to be positive psychology and well-being. So I really have been looking at that pretty seriously for the past 5 years because I want to get to the source of this. Now, Martin Seligman was a philosophy major at Princeton as a student. Well, here's one thing I want to, I'll go here. In history, we have a number of books that after studying positive psychology, I just thought, well, we've been doing that for a long time as architects, and we've been talking about that for a long time. In fact, many of these books include the word happiness in it or terms that positive psychology would use, like a sense of community, relationships, etc., sense of place. So we have a history of writing about how we create environments that create a sense of well-being. So why did I visit Finland and Denmark? Well, it's a very human-centered architecture. It has a good long history of that. Especially, I'm a big fan of Alder Aalto, who has taught in the United States and done a couple of buildings in the United States. He's from Finland in the 30s through the 60s. And it's very human-centered in its design. It's just thinks about the human being first, not about construction techniques or not about the latest means of production. And of course, both these countries are, their latitude is fairly high up and near the Arctic Circle. So they have, especially in the winter times, it's kind of a challenge for them psychologically. And they've been ranked very high in the Happy Country survey. Okay. And so I don't know if you ever get a chance to look at this, but from 2017 to 19, actually they come out with one annually. From 2007 to 19 now, Finland and Denmark came out 1 and 2 in this. And you can see the United States now is number 18 on the list. There's about 153 countries listed. If you, right after the United States, I just cut it off, and you can see Afghanistan is dead last. So usually war-torn countries are last on the survey. So United States actually did pretty well in 2020, but we jumped up to number 14, surprisingly enough. We beat out Canada. So Canada jumped fell to number 15. But their rankings are interesting, and it's explained by GDP per capita. So the amount of social support, who you can call on, say if you're sick or whatever, healthy life, your healthcare system, freedom to make life's choices, and explain, and also generosity, and perceptions of corruption, which we don't rank too high in right now. And then the last one, dystopia, I don't totally understand that one, but it's kind of a baseline score. So if you look at these, how how it all kind of lays out in these color codes up here. You can see, the United States is fairly high in GDP, okay? And then you can kind of look at the rest of the bars. And the shorter they are, the worse your score is, okay? So the Scandinavian countries do very well. Norway, the Netherlands, which is near there, Sweden, and et cetera. So, a lot of these are countries that have free education. Norway is probably the closest to to socialism as far as a means of production. The government owns the oil companies there, a lot of oil companies. But the rest of them are, they're social democracies. So if you look at these measurements, and Seligman has a different way of looking at happiness or well-being, and he calls it PERMA. Okay, and so the first pillar, so he sees it as 5 pillars. Positive emotions or pleasure is one, and he says you're usually born with, a sunny disposition, but you can and you can go outside that norm of what you're born with, and you can do certain things like being in a nice environment would be one, and to improve that. And then these others, ERMA, are a little harder to attain, and they're not always pleasant. But the second one is engagement, and that idea is borrowed heavily from the book Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. If you remember, that book came out in the 90s, and it's about finding meaningful work and being totally engaged in what you're doing, but being very present and mindful. Ours relationships now, I don't know if architecture can now help a marriage, but we do look at sense of community. We try to create a sense of community as architects. So that's I think near enough to relationships that architects can get. Meaning is a big part of that, having a sense of purpose, but also architects and many other fields talk about a sense of meaning. Certain cities have a greater sense of meaning than others. And then the last one's achievement, which also resonates well with architecture, because we're always kind of pushing the limit, and we celebrate buildings of great achievement, which I'll show at the end in whatever how they do it in terms of excellence. So Seligman, being a philosophy major, probably picked up on eudaimonian happiness, which Aristotle wrote about in his book called Nicomachean Ethics. And it's more virtue ethics and the qualities of what a good life is. But he names a number of elements now that you balance out, and you create a sense of balance from these elements. And a couple of them, just to mention, would be temperance, excellence, friendships, and wit, etc. And there's this mean that you achieve between two extremes in these. But friendships is a big part of this. The other person that's often contrasted with him, but I think overlaps with him quite a bit, is of course Epicurus. And he's more branded as a hedonist, but I don't know. I think he's closer to Aristotle than many people give him credit for. But he also valued friendships. Good food and wine, but simple food and wine, nothing extravagant, sensitive and discriminating tastes, all in moderation. And sense of comfort was very important, being free of pain, since he suffered from stomach ailments all his life. and a sense of tranquility, very, very important to him. So it's not a jacked up kind of pleasure that you might get off dopamine. It's more of a serotonin pleasure that he promotes. Another person that Seligman looks to quite a bit, especially when it comes to pleasure and positive emotions, is Barbara Fredrickson of UNC, University of North Carolina. And she talks quite a bit about the broaden and build theory of positive emotions, that once you're in a positive state, you can broaden your mind, you're more creative, you're not as narrowly focused, and so you can take in disparate ideas more easily. And as you know, if any of you kind of experience a sense of tranquility, your mind seems to be more open to new things. So let's talk about winter design for well-being. And one of the things that in these Denmark and Finland respond to is darkness, because it's and like in Moscow, you know, at 4:30 it's dark here compared to the rest of the state, and it really gets to some people. I know it got to my friend who now lives in Boise. In fact, he always ribs me about how dark Moscow is. But it is something that does weigh on us at times. And so before I traveled there, I expected to see a lot of places like what I'd seen in Stockholm 20 years ago. And I was surprised that I didn't see this type of thing, highly lit places. In fact, I saw what was more akin to this, which is, you know, like Christmas, right? And so during Christmas and the holidays, we tend to put up sparkly lights and colors that we don't, that kind of make us feel cozy, in a fireplace, and dimly lit light. And so this is akin to the term it's called Danish hygge. And it's a sense of coziness where you sit more in a dark room, but you have a candle or a fireplace in the background. And in the espresso house, which is all over Finland and Scandinavia, this is the feeling that you get when you go into these places. Is it's kind of dimly lit, but you have these lamps and occasionally chandeliers, and you know, brown tones. It's a very cozy feeling, and it's kind of a serene feeling, really comfortable feeling. And we have the similar response to in Moscow in the wintertime. This was a couple of nights ago near Tapt, and they put out their lights. But Main Street also has its lights that are lit up. So we have some response to this, and these lights are on all year long, right? Not just during Christmas. But when I got to Finland, it was just this magnified. It was magnified so much more. And even on the buildings now, the buildings either would be lit up by light, or include the light fixtures. And here's the train station by the architect Eli Saarinen, who later moved to the United States and headed up. His son was taught at Yale University and did the St. Louis Arch. But anyway, lots of lights like this, starlights, these points of light. And so walking around Helsinki, I saw a lot of this type of thing, and these little starlight. And down in Copenhagen, you have Tivoli Gardens, of course, and it's lit up like a Christmas tree in the wintertime. And Copenhagen, during the time I was there, I lucked out. I just stumbled on it in early February, or through the month of February. They have the Copenhagen Festival of Lights, where they bring in artists from around the world, and they have a light festival. So these artists put up these different light shows for everybody to enjoy, and they float around in the harbors and enjoy these different light shows. Here's one, I don't know the name of the person. And they also would do it to buildings too. And so they'd light the buildings up on the outside or from the inside with colored lights. So it was very enjoyable and a kind of countermeasure, almost like a type of pill that you would take for winter, I think, a prescription for the winter blues. Because, by February, things have, winter is can't wait till it gets over. And a little more jazz. So that's about as commercial as it got. But it was fun. It was fun to walk around and see these different light shows. But I thought the most interesting ones were in Finland. Here's Tampere. And just after it snowed, these lights came on this building, this campus building, and they couldn't figure out where the light source was on this, but these letters moved, these words moved across the facade of the building. This was one of their colleges. It was just incredible. And then on street lights, instead of just having the light source and just giving general illumination, it would shine down like a spotlight onto the sidewalks. So it definitely wasn't like Times Square or what you see in a lot of or London, Piccadilly Circus, or in Asia, where it's just huge billboards. It's not commercialized over there. So it's not this kind of dopamine pleasure of high intensity like you would see at Times Square. It's more of a subtle type of pleasure. And you'd see it in the everyday architecture. Here we are in Copenhagen by the architect Bjarke Engels group. Say, like in this apartment complex, here you have this whole hallway would be bright yellow. You really can't see this in the photograph, but it'd be bright yellow and lit up more. Same with this hallway. And in the garage next door, this is one of the coolest parking garages I've seen. And the lighting in it is just fantastic, very surreal. But the airport, I thought by Helsinki Airport, we had some really interesting light fixtures. And here you can see how it's shining onto the ground, and they're mixing these different subtle colors. So instead of being bombarded in an airport by signs, buy this, Nike or whatever, it was a very kind of pleasant, tranquil type of pleasure as you're walking into Helsinki and being greeted by Helsinki and not having this flood of commercialism. Although there were parts of the airport that were, had malls, etc. But just this room was so relaxing to be in, and the light fixtures were really interesting. So contrast this with the gray outside, which is their typical day is very gray during the day. So winter outdoor spaces, they have quite a few of them in these countries, and which it didn't surprise me that much, but I've been interested in how do you create winter outdoor spaces, and because the outside is so much more healthy than the inside. And so when I went to Jyväskylä, Finland, which is, getting up near the Arctic Circle, probably about 300 miles away from it. This is just after it snowed, and Jyväskylä is about the size of Meridian, Idaho, so about 140,000 people, but an eighth of the landmass. So it's a very dense. These cities are very dense, and so housing is is 3 stories above the stores down below, and there were a lot of people out on the streets, and it was about 40 degrees, maybe 35 at this point after the snow, and people were just comfortable being outside in Jyväskylä. So being outside, just being outside does a lot for us, for our bodily health, and particularly in the winter time, because we spend so much time inside in recycled air, which can spread germs and bacteria. So illnesses go up quite a bit, and there's more of a sense of exercise when you're outside and moving around. It's good for your mental health, where you get views of nature. And you have higher light quality, much higher light outside, even in the wintertime. And then there's communal relationships where you're running into friends and striking up conversations by being outside rather than inside watching TV. And when I had studied Sun Valley, I would take these photographs of at different temperatures. Here's 30 degrees on the right. These people are perfectly comfortable outside near Christmas time. And I brought my students down to Sun Valley in March, and it was 35 degrees here. Here's the snow everywhere, and yet we're all able to be in swimming suits because we allowed in the sun and we blocked the wind. The Sun Valley Resort blocked the wind. So if you take care of those 2 things, you can walk around in your swimming suit with no problem. And even in Moscow here, even when it's cloudy, I took this picture at One World Cafe at 35 degrees. People are still want to be outside. And in March, look how many people are outside here. So in Copenhagen, you have a lot of outdoor restaurants, and they make it very comfortable by these heat lamps and fires here, by putting, this was the most elaborate one on the left here, by putting fur out there. So it's very comfortable sitting outside. And so that's that hygge brought from the inside to the outside. Okay? So the other thing I learned was strategic placement. Okay, and that they typically, like in a grocery store, they place first certain things near the entrance, so that's like in Winco, it's there's junk food that they want to move really quick. In other grocery stores, it's more vegetables, etc., because it's more colorful. So where they place things in relation to entryways and other things, important buildings, it really struck me for the first time in Finland when I saw in Helsinki. So again, it reinforces bodily health for exercise, which we'll see healthy food choices in grocery stores and even libraries, as I'll show later on, and mental health for exercise again, and healthy food choices, which is, so when I was in Helsinki at the Aalto Institute, I experienced this for the first time. And so here you can see it's 3:30 in the afternoon here, and above. So this is a kind of a mall / classroom building. So it's a combination between an American mall and a classroom building. But going in here, you see on the bottom floor is the coffee shop, very dim light. But then what up above, and clear for everybody to see, was a gymnasium. And one of the best things for combating winter depression is exercise. And so this wasn't the first place I saw this in. but brighter light in these areas than say in the coffee shop down below. And these would usually be near the entrances. Here we are in Tempura at a shopping mall, where again, here's the front entrance to the mall. And what you see above it is a gymnasium. So you see people cycling, etc. So they're encouraging people just by placing them near the entrance to be fit and healthy. And then when you walk in, you don't see a flood of food malls, food places. You see a climbing wall. Okay? So engagement right there. So kids climbing up the wall, they're active. You don't see a slew of people eating food, okay? Or unhealthy food, fast food. So another place that it struck me inside this mall was the drugstore. And the first thing you see when you walk in is vitamins, okay? And then you get your drugs in the back. And then off to the corner by where you check out to get your food is the candy bars, but it's not easy to get to. Compare that to, say, Rite Aid or Walgreens. As you walk in, you get bombarded by junk food. And so they're looking at impulse buying here, right? It's very much, Hansel and Gretel like, in that, okay, so here's the stuff that's causing all the painkillers that you need to buy in the back or need to treat for diabetes or whatever. So it's a little bit sinister in a way, but here in the drugstore, you're looking at prevention first, right? Reinforcing good habits. And then not, the candy bars are there, but they're hidden. And I saw this also in we're buying food. The junk food didn't hit you right up front. You would have, healthy, not non-processed food as you entered into the grocery store first. Oops. Okay. So another thing that you can learn from these happy countries is Jan Gehl wrote a book called People Cities, and he's promoting, he really turned Copenhagen around, and he's influenced a lot of thinking in the United States, but bicycling, making alternative paths for bicycling. And Copenhagen is just like Amsterdam in that sense. You really got to watch yourself when you walk around, because a bike could hit you. There's so many bicyclists, and it's so safe to ride a bicycle in Copenhagen. So there's alternatives for that. And they celebrate the parking, a parking garage for bikes here. And here's an example by Kobe Architects, just by the Royal Danish Academy of the Arts. So they make it fun, and it's playful. It's a playful expression. Another thing that he promotes, and here's a book by one of his colleagues, David Sim, is soft cities. So he looks very carefully at edges of buildings, which I promote in my class. And that, the bottom floor now should spill out, have some kind of engagement with the sidewalk. And then here you have an exercise class on the second floor, something that can promote healthy living. Then you have about 3 stories of living up above that. And having a courtyard type setting for blocks in redoing blocks in these different settings, and it's not a monolithic block. It's more of a kind of a natural organic block. So some of the architects, this is the Jim Carrey of architects, Bjarke Ingels out of Copenhagen. And his architecture is very much like Legos. And of course, Legos comes out of is a Danish product. And here's a Lego model of one of his projects, which is a waste burning plant that you can ski on the top of it. So here you see off to the left is the smokestack. But it's very much in this kind of Lego fashion, or Sim Cities. He's also called the Sim City architect. He's just a big kid. He acts like a big kid. He's 45 years old. He's a pretty young guy, and his buildings are so playful. So I visited this plant. Here's looking down at the top of it, the ski slope here. Here you can see the smoke coming out of the smokestack here. He wanted to have it so that it puffed out like a O-ring, like when you puff out O-rings when you smoke, but they couldn't afford that. But they got this thing, and everybody can see it. You can see it from downtown on the edge of the city. So it takes old tires or cardboard or whatever the trash is, and it has a different rating for each. Tires burn really well, and it no pollution coming out at the top. So it's that kind of innovation that you see in these countries. There's another project, a housing project, 8 Talet. It's at the end of a mass transit, so the trains are over to the left. And this is in a 8 configuration that tapers down so everybody gets a good view of the farmland. But on the bottom floor, you have businesses, and then up above, you have housing. Okay, and everybody has a deck, or most everybody has a deck that they can be outside with. And here's another view of looking out to the farmland, the pasture land. So it's interesting projects, and the center is like the downtown. If you think of this thing as a miniature city, that where the cross is what like their downtown. So more, there's more of a grocery store there, et cetera, coffee shops down below, et cetera. And here's on the lower floors. So the first 4 floors are actually offices here in this case. And then you have the upper floors as the apartments. But it's pretty brutal on the street where the mass transit delivers you out to. It's not a pleasant thing to look at on the outside. It's more pleasant on the inside. And I don't think Jan Gehl would approve. I don't think he gets along with him very well, with Bjarke Ingels. But at any rate, that's just kind of his style. Near town is more, you see the influence of Jan Gehl in the Christian Haven neighborhood, where they use brick and more traditional materials. But bottom floor again is businesses, coffee shops, et cetera, that spill out into the plaza here. And then almost everybody has a outdoor deck that connects to the outdoors. The last architects I'll talk about, and I'll finish off with these guys, is ALA Architects, who we've developed a relationship. They're out of Helsinki. Antti Nuusjoki came to speak with us about 5 years ago and showed us the next project I'm going to show you. And very thoughtful group. They're again in their early 40s. And the project I want to really showcase their work in is the Helsinki Central Library. Now, the first time I saw this, I thought, oh my gosh, these are an example of architects gone wild. They're just being exhibitionists here. And what's this building all about, et cetera. But then as I began to go inside and see how the programming developed, what's next to what, and looked at the spaces, I thought, oh, this is something special. So in fact, it hits all 5 of these pillars very strongly. And I think it contributes to the sense of well-being and the perception of happiness in these happiness surveys. Because it hits so many of these so strongly. And it also resonates very strongly with the architectural philosopher Karsten Harry's book, The Ethical Function of Architecture, where he talks about the cathedral being the, how much time do I have, Kenton? Do I have enough? You're going to 1:45?
Yeah, if you can, we'll lose some people at 1:30, but
Okay.
if you can wrap up in the next 10 minutes or so and
Oh, yeah.
move over to questions.
Easily, yeah. So anyway, he talks about in his book that the cathedral, the Gothic Cathedral, was the epitome of promoting happiness, basically. We don't have a building today that can match the power of the cathedral, because the cathedral tells stories. It's a storytelling machine. It was a market during Saturdays, so a place where people gathered. It was the stories tell of sacrifice, but the sacrifice is all for the cause of going to heaven, right? So there's this promise of hope in a cathedral. And of course, stained glass, is so beautiful. And it's so serene in these places that your mind kind of opens up, like in the broaden and build theory, and so you're more open to new ideas, etc. But there is a strong promise of hope and the future, thinking about the future in going to heaven, etc. So I think this library is, and he says, of course, he says nothing has matched that today, but I think this library is giving the cathedral a good run for its money. First off, in the placement of it, it's on the main square. So the main square has these concert halls, museums, art museums. One of the finest in the world is there. Buildings by Alvar Aalto, concert halls. And right across from the alley is Parliament House. So government is there. So this is a very significant and meaningful square to place this library on. It's a part of a family of it's an attitude that the Finnish have about the arts and the promotion of the arts and elevating the person. And look at this cantilever here. It's 70 feet. I measured it, and I mean, whoa! That just kind of blows you away when you're underneath the thing. So that's an achievement in itself in how they conquer gravity. So here it is on one of the days. It's a background building for. There was a protest. These people on the left were protesting that the immigration wasn't loose enough, and these guys on the right, Sons of Odin in their black jackets, looking kind of menacing, were counter demonstrators to the demonstrators to the left here, and they were considered nationalists, and they weren't for immigration at all. But again, that library forms a good background for that kind of activity. So if you look at the first story, so the entrance is right around in the middle here, and you go into here, and that first floor is off to the right, the pop-up exhibitions, which is more of a, here's what we're proud of in Finland, our landscapes, our culture, etc. That's all on display. And then there's a gallery up above. There's a cinema over here to the left. Part of the holdover from the cathedral in many ways, in education. And then off to the left is also a cafe restaurant, so very near the entrance. And again, it's like the grocery stores where they're serving whole foods and unprocessed foods. So they're encouraging you to eat well. And compare it to our library, which basically sells you junk food as you walk in. Which does help you concentrate for a while. This is encouraging healthy behavior, and the cooks are on display, etc. And then the gallery is upstairs, so it's giving you hope for the future. Here on display here was architecture students' work on the future of plans for Finland, for Helsinki in this particular part of town. So there is this kind of hope there for a better future. And then you go up this double helix stairway, which is called the Leonardo Stare, after Leonardo's invention of a double helix stair. Really great stairway. And you go up to the second level, which is the makerspace area. So that's a great place, you know, it's kind of dark and cozy. But the first thing you see is these sewing machines. So sewing is a very popular activity in Finland. But here you see that you get these seats here that are overlooking the people that are making stuff in here. So there's the maker space in the middle, meeting rooms, studios. So it's all about creation in this level, which is interesting. So it's very hands-on. It's not theoretical. And then the top, like any great reading room, is usually on the top floor because that's where the ceiling is. Here's the reading room. And so it's got a coffee shop off to the left here, which is just off to the left. You can't see it. So you can sip an espresso or coffee and just enjoy the whole space. The ceiling is like an upside down snowfield, I think. It's kind of surreal. And then you got places that sit up high. And then on the other end is so here it is. So the cafe's right over here, and it spills out into an outdoor deck that overlooks the square and overlooks Parliament House. And then you've got the kids area off to the left. And that's the place I want to end up with. Because usually kids are kind of tucked into a corner. The kids are prominently in a high space. So I'm looking down from the kids area, looking down into another kids area, but the kids are elevated. And so that says something, I think. You know, they're not kind of tucked away in this nook off to the side. They're on full display, and that's the future of your country right there is the kids. So why not elevate them? And you can imagine as a kid, you know, going up to this upper level and looking at books, et cetera, and seeing down below and seeing these adult books below there, you know, that sense of wonder you would have as a kid, and this is my future, et cetera. But the elevation of the kids, I think, is so important. So anyway, since I've gotten back, I've been in fourth year in urban studio, and so I've been focusing my efforts on downtown because I think it hits most of these pillars of PERMA. And so I always have them redesign Friendship Square, and I take on one block.
Nice.
And this was where the Shields building is. And they'll have to convert an old building into something new. So the Shields building is now on the top floor is a garden space. So it's like a ruin, and then you've got housing on top here. And then since we are the heart of the arts, we promote ourselves the heart of the arts. The maker space is in the middle. It is a courtyard type of complex, and here you see the Shields building off to the left. But the maker space is in the middle, and this Sierra decided to put a trophy case in there. So every month the display would change with a new art project that had been chosen for that month and elevated in this trophy case for achievement. So I'll end with that. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Well, thank you for the informative and illuminating presentation, Phil. And as we head into our darker days, it's helpful to see what other parts of the world do. And we have a question from our former mayor, Nancy Cheney, asking about lighting. Could you speak to U.S. cities' common use of the bright blue-white spectrum LEDs, ostensibly for safety, relative to the Scandinavian countries' focus on warm artfulness and the hygge
Yeah.
that you described?
Well, yeah, blue is very efficient at waking you up. So that's not so great at nighttime because you don't want to act. What blue does is it suppresses melatonin, which melatonin helps you go to sleep. So blue light is great in the morning. And if they turn it on, during a dark morning, that would be good. But it is not so great at night because it delays your sleep. The other thing about blue light, especially I've seen it in Chicago used where it looks blue, and there's an association with police there. It seems to ward off criminal activity with the blue light. Yeah, the LEDs, they may not look blue, but they do affect your light, your staying awake. And I'm worried about that because we just put in new lighting in our studio. And it's LED, it's very high efficient and with going on the blue spectrum. So they're perfect for, our students going in there in the morning, but at nighttime, it's waking them up more. So I'm not happy about the new lights in the architecture building because we want to encourage our students to go to sleep at night.
Other questions from our dwindling audience. I know people do have classes or appointments at 1:30, but if you can stay a little longer, I think would be interesting to hear a little Q&A with our presenter. So here's a question from Ashkan wondering, how did you find indoor landscaping in their architecture? And we're looking now at trees in the children's area. You want to say a little bit about the use of plants and vegetation in the interiors?
Well, this is really one of the only few buildings I saw plants in, but it does help the mood quite a bit, I think, especially when it's dark outside. And, gray outside, I mean, it's so gray there in the wintertime. And even in the summertime, the light is very low. Yeah, getting back to plants, I didn't really specifically look at that too much. More at the lighting inside than anything. And that sense of hygge, that sense of coziness.
Phil, your images of the Helsinki Library caused me to think a little bit about the Seattle, Maine Public Library, which was, I think one of the architects was Rem Koolhaas.
Yes.
But I'm just wondering what you think of that building in a similarly gloomy gray city.
Yeah. Yeah, well, one of the reasons why those funky angles are on the building is because they placed the program inside in such a way so that you would, in the public spaces, you would get great views of the city and maximize the light coming in. And that's the reason why it's so ugly on the outside. I mean, there's no other way to describe that building than ugly, I think. But they're looking at these hard things, right? The views are very important, and the light coming in. So, side note, Auntie, who worked on this library, also worked on the Seattle Library for Rem Koolhaas. So he and Bjarke Ingels actually worked together on the Seattle Library. So it's very programmatically driven. It's not as much about pleasantness from the urban outside in, but I think from the inside out, it's wow, it's fantastic library. I love it on the inside, not so much on the outside.
So a couple of good questions coming in chat. Blake is wondering about the workforce in Scandinavia. Do these countries have issues completing projects in a timely manner, or do things get spread out over multiple years from design to construction to occupation?
I didn't look into that. Not specifically, but I don't know. Supposedly they're all happy, so they shouldn't be in too much of a hurry to get things done. But I'm sure it's unionized, and so they get off work at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right? And pick up the kids and all that stuff. So I'd imagine that they're in no big hurry to get things done. Not like in America, where everything's prized on who can do it the quickest, but then burn out afterwards.
Jerry is wondering, in terms of the optimum design for the hygge, is there a ratio of curved lines to symmetrical lines? And I think, again, with the image that's on the screen, we're seeing a little bit of both, but wondering how squareness versus roundness, or curves versus straight lines might influence people's sense of coziness.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. Curves, especially in furniture, their furniture is exquisite and it's very human, adapted to the human body and sitting. So more on the smaller scale, I think, and in a library, you have a little bit of extra money, so you can now splurge on, an unusual ceiling such as this. But I think it's more on the smaller, in general, it's more at the smaller scale, like carpets, as you see here, or furniture, or landscape features of stairs in this case. It's very inexpensive to build at a right angle, right? And so you always got to, as architects, we're always mindful of a budget. So you have to, where you can splurge, like in the top room in a building, well, okay, you can be more curvilinear. But most buildings are pretty standard squareness. Let's go back to let's look at this coffee shop here. Well, yeah. So here's a good example in the airport. You can see, that beautiful sensual landscape. And this was a live shot. This is a movie playing of the landscape. So it was just so tranquil to be in that room after a long flight. Flights are stressful, and this was so peaceful. And so, yeah, I mean, you can do that easily with mobile elements like furniture and screens and light fixtures. But you look at beyond it, and the budget of the architecture is right angles.
Well, that's a good note to end on, and I want to invite everyone remaining in the audience, if you would like to turn on your cameras and give a round of applause, or put up your hand on the screen to tell our speaker thanks for his great presentation today. Remember, we will not meet next week, so the next gathering is 2 weeks from today, Tuesday, November 30th, and our presentation will be by Matthew Fox Amato from the U of I Department of History. So enjoy the sunshine as it punctuates our gray November, and I look forward to seeing everybody in 2 weeks. So have a great Thanksgiving break, and look forward to continued exposure to interdisciplinary eyes as the colloquium continues November 30th. So thank you, Phil.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.